The snow came down in sheets so thick that Patrick Yates could barely see his horse's ears, and somewhere out in that white hell, he heard a woman screaming. He had been riding fence line for the better part of 3 days, checking on cattle that had wandered too far from the ranch before this late March storm hit the Missouri plains in 1879. Most folks thought winter was done by now, but Patrick knew better. He had seen spring blizzards before, cruel and sudden, dropping 2 feet of snow in a matter of hours. This one was shaping up to be a killer. The temperature had plummeted so fast that his breath came out in clouds thick enough to choke on, and ice had already formed in his mustache, despite the wool scarf wrapped around his face. The scream came again, higher pitched this time, more desperate. Patrick urged his gelding forward, leaning low in the saddle to shield his face from the stinging snow. He was miles from anywhere, at least 10 miles south of Nevada, Missouri, where he kept a small room above the general store when he was not working cattle for the Harrington Ranch. Out here there should not be anyone, especially not in weather like this. Through the curtain of white, he finally spotted it. A covered wagon tilted at an angle, one wheel clearly broken, the canvas top sagging under the weight of accumulated snow. The horses that had been pulling it were gone, probably cut loose or run off in panic. Another scream split the air, and Patrick was off his mount before he could think twice about it. "Hello in there," he shouted, fighting his way through snow that was already knee-deep. "I am coming to help." He yanked back the canvas flap and immediately wished he had a woman with him, any woman who knew about these things. Inside the wagon, 2 women huddled together, one clearly in the final throes of labor, her face twisted in agony, her dress soaked with sweat despite the cold. The other woman, younger and healthier looking, held her sister's hand and turned terrified eyes toward Patrick. "Please," the younger woman gasped. "Please help her. The baby is coming and I do not know what to do. We have been out here for hours and she is so weak." Patrick had delivered calves and foals, even helped a rancher's wife once when the doctor could not make it through a flood, but this was different. This woman was clearly in a bad way. Her lips had a blue tinge to them, and her breathing came in shallow, rapid gasps. She was dying, he realized with a cold certainty that had nothing to do with the temperature. "What is your name?" he asked the younger woman, shrugging out of his heavy coat. Rachel Anderson. This is my sister, Margaret. We were heading west to meet her husband in California. He went ahead to find work and sent for her, but the wagon wheel broke and then the snow came and she went into labor, and I do not know what to do." The words tumbled out in a rush, panic making her voice shake. "All right, Rachel. I am Patrick Yates and I am going to help you both. First, I need you to take a breath and calm down. Your sister needs you steady right now." He moved closer to Margaret, who let out another scream, her back arching. "Madam, I know you are scared, but I am going to help you bring this baby into the world. Do you understand?" Margaret's eyes rolled toward him, unfocused and glassy. "My baby," she whispered. "Save my baby." Patrick looked at Rachel and saw in her eyes that she understood what he had already realized. Margaret was not going to make it. The birth was too hard, too long, and she had been exposed to the cold for too many hours. But the baby might have a chance. "Rachel, I need you to hold her shoulders. When the next pain comes, she needs to push with everything she has got." Patrick positioned himself at the end of the wagon bed, grateful that at least the wagon provided some shelter from the howling wind outside. His hands were already numb despite his gloves, and he stripped them off, knowing he would need his fingers sensitive for this work. The next hour was the longest of Patrick's life. Margaret pushed when he told her to, though her strength was fading with every contraction. Rachel held her sister, whispering encouragements and prayers in equal measure, tears streaming down her face. Patrick worked with a steady focus born of necessity, refusing to think about the cold or the storm or the impossibility of the situation. He had a job to do, and he was damn well going to do it. "I can see the head," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "One more push, Margaret, just one more." Margaret gathered what must have been the last of her strength and bore down. The baby slipped into Patrick's waiting hands, tiny and blue and terrifyingly still. Without hesitation, he cleared the infant's mouth and nose, rubbing the small chest vigorously. For a long, horrible moment, nothing happened. Then the baby gasped, let out a thin wail, and Patrick felt something in his chest unclench. "It is a girl," he said, wrapping the baby quickly in his coat, holding her close to his body for warmth. "You have a daughter, Margaret." But Margaret could not hear him. Her eyes had closed, her breathing so shallow it was barely visible. Rachel leaned over her sister, sobbing. "Maggie, please, please stay with us. Your baby needs you." Patrick moved forward, placing the baby in Rachel's arms. "Hold her close. Skin to skin if you can manage it under your clothes. She needs your warmth." Then he turned to Margaret, checking for a pulse. It was there, but faint and irregular. "Margaret," he said firmly. "Margaret, look at me." Her eyes fluttered open, just barely. "My baby. She is beautiful and she is breathing. She needs her mama." A ghost of a smile crossed Margaret's blue lips. "Tell her," she whispered, so quiet Patrick had to lean in close to hear. "Tell her I loved her. Tell her I wanted her so much." "You are going to tell her yourself," Patrick said, but he knew it was a lie even as the words left his mouth. "Rachel," Margaret breathed, turning her head toward her sister. "Take care of her, promise me." "I promise," Rachel sobbed. "I promise, Maggie, I swear it." Margaret's gaze moved back to Patrick, and something in her eyes made him go still. "You are a good man," she whispered. "I can see it. Please, please help my sister, help my baby." "I will," Patrick said. "I give you my word." Margaret's eyes closed again, and this time they did not open. Her chest rose once more, fell, and then went still. Rachel let out a sound that was more animal than human, a keen of pure grief that cut through even the howl of the wind. She bent over her sister's body, the baby still clutched against her chest, and wept. Patrick sat back on his heels, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle onto his shoulders like a physical burden. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside the wagon, a woman lay dead and a newborn baby whimpered, and he was responsible for keeping them all alive through the night. He reached out and gently touched Rachel's shoulder. "I am sorry for your loss, more sorry than I can say, but we need to think about the living now. That baby needs milk, and we need shelter better than this wagon. My horse can carry all three of us if we are careful. There is an old line shack about 2 miles north of here. It is not much, but it will keep us out of the worst of the wind." Rachel raised her head, her face red and swollen with tears. "I cannot leave her. I cannot leave Maggie out here in the cold." "We will come back for her," Patrick said quietly, "when the storm breaks and we can bring a proper wagon. Right now, that baby is what matters. That is what your sister wanted. You heard her. She asked you to take care of her daughter." Rachel looked down at the tiny face barely visible in the folds of Patrick's coat. The baby had stopped crying and was making small, snuffling sounds. "I do not even know how to take care of a baby," she whispered. "I never had one. Maggie was supposed to teach me when I had my own someday." "We will figure it out together," Patrick said, with more confidence than he felt. "But we need to move now, before this storm gets any worse." Getting everyone out of the wagon and onto Patrick's horse was a feat that required every bit of strength and ingenuity he possessed. He wrapped Margaret's body as well as he could in blankets and canvas, securing it inside the wagon so animals would not get to her. Then he helped Rachel mount his gelding, the baby still pressed against her chest, wrapped in layers of fabric and leather. He swung up behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her steady, the other holding the reins. The ride to the line shack was 2 miles of pure hell. The wind screamed at them from every direction, and the snow was so thick that Patrick navigated more by instinct and memory than by sight. His gelding was a good horse, steady and strong, but even he struggled through drifts that reached his chest. Rachel shook against Patrick's arm, whether from cold or grief or both, he could not tell. The baby had gone ominously quiet, and Patrick prayed she was just sleeping and not slipping away. When the dark shape of the line shack finally materialized through the white, Patrick felt a relief so intense it made him dizzy. He dismounted first, then helped Rachel down, taking the baby from her long enough for her to get her feet under her. He shouldered open the door, which had drifted half shut with snow, and got them both inside. The shack was crude, just 4 walls, a roof, a stone fireplace, and a couple of rough bunks built into the walls. But it was shelter, and right now that was worth more than gold. Patrick got Rachel settled on one of the bunks with the baby, then went back out into the storm to tend to his horse. He could not bring the gelding inside, but he could put him on the lee side of the building where the wind would not hit him as hard. He pulled the saddle and bridle, rubbed the horse down as best he could with a handful of straw from his saddle bag, and put a feed bag over his nose with the last of the oats he had been carrying. "Sorry, old son," he murmured, running a hand down the horse's neck. "I will make it up to you when this is over." Back inside, he barred the door and immediately set to building a fire. There was wood stacked against one wall, dry and ready, and within minutes he had flames licking up the chimney. The heat was glorious, almost painful against his frozen skin. He turned to check on Rachel and the baby and found Rachel staring at him with wide, frightened eyes. "She is so cold," Rachel whispered. "I can barely feel her breathing." Patrick crossed to the bunk in 3 strides. "Let me see her." Rachel unwrapped the layers carefully, revealing the tiny infant underneath. The baby was still blue around the lips, and her breathing was rapid and shallow. Patrick had seen enough newborn animals to know that was not good. "She needs more warmth than we can give her like this," he said. "And she needs milk soon. Did your sister manage to nurse her at all before?" Rachel shook her head. "There was not time. Everything happened so fast." Patrick thought fast. "All right. Here is what we are going to do. You need to get out of those wet clothes and into something dry. I have an extra shirt in my saddle bag that will be too big, but at least it is dry. Then you are going to wrap yourself in every blanket we have got. Put that baby inside your shirt against your skin and hold her close. Your body heat is the best chance she has right now." "But I do not have milk," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "How am I supposed to feed her?" "One problem at a time," Patrick said. "First, we keep her warm. Then we figure out the rest." He turned his back while Rachel changed, busying himself with unpacking what few supplies he had. A canteen of water, some jerky, hardtack, coffee, a tin cup. Not much to sustain 2 adults and a newborn, but it would have to do until the storm passed. When Rachel told him she was decent, he turned back to find her huddled under a pile of blankets, the baby pressed against her chest, barely visible. Patrick added more wood to the fire and then sat down on the other bunk, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. Every muscle in his body ached, and his hands were starting to burn as feeling came back into his frozen fingers. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and he knew they were in for a long night. "Tell me about your sister," he said quietly. "What was she like?" Rachel was silent for a long moment, and Patrick thought maybe she was not going to answer. Then she started talking, her voice soft and rough with unshed tears. "Maggie was 3 years older than me. She practically raised me after our mother died when I was 8. She was beautiful and kind, and she always wanted a family of her own. When Thomas, her husband, asked her to marry him, she was so happy. She cried for joy. He was a good man, or at least I thought he was. He left for California 6 months ago, promising to send for her as soon as he had a job and a place for them to live. The letter came 2 months ago. Maggie was already 4 months along by then, but she would not wait. She said she needed to be with her husband, that she wanted him to see his baby born. "Why did you come with her?" Patrick asked. "I could not let her make that journey alone," Rachel said. "We hired a wagon and a driver, an old man named Mr. Peterson who said he knew the trail. But he took sick 2 weeks ago. We buried him outside Topeka. Maggie said we should turn back, but I was the one who insisted we keep going. I thought we could make it. I thought I could handle the wagon." Her voice broke. "This is my fault. If I had listened to her, if we had turned back, she would still be alive." "No," Patrick said firmly. "This is not your fault. These things happen. Childbirth is dangerous, and being caught in a storm does not help, but women die in birthing beds in warm houses with doctors attending them too. You did everything you could for your sister. She knew that. That is why she trusted you with her baby." Rachel looked down at the small bundle pressed against her chest. "I do not even know what to name her. Maggie never said. I think she was waiting to see her husband first to decide together." "That is something you can think about," Patrick said. "Right now, let us just focus on getting through the night." But getting through the night proved harder than he had anticipated. The baby woke every hour or so, crying weakly, clearly hungry. Patrick tried dipping a corner of cloth in water and letting the baby suck on it, but that only worked for a few minutes before she was wailing again. Rachel was beside herself, crying along with the infant, clearly at a loss. "What if she dies?" Rachel whispered at one point, her voice raw. "What if I lose her too? I promised Maggie I would take care of her." "She is not going to die," Patrick said, with a determination that surprised even himself. "I did not deliver that baby in the middle of a blizzard just to lose her now. Come morning, when the storm breaks, I am riding back to town. The doctor there has a wife who just had a baby. Maybe she can nurse this little one at least until we figure something else out." "What if the storm does not break?" Rachel asked. "It will," Patrick said. "Storms always do." He was right. By dawn, the wind had died down to a whisper, and the snow had stopped falling. The world outside the line shack was transformed into a landscape of white, drifts piled high against the walls, the sun just starting to break over the horizon in a blaze of pink and gold. It was beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Patrick saddled his gelding while it was still half dark, leaving Rachel and the baby wrapped warm by the fire. "I will be back by midday," he promised. "Keep the fire going and keep her warm. Talk to her. Sing to her if you can. Just keep her awake and fighting." The ride back to Nevada took longer than he expected. The snow was deep, and his horse was tired from the previous day's ordeal. By the time he reached the outskirts of town, the sun was fully up, and people were starting to dig out from the storm. Patrick went straight to the doctor's house, pounding on the door until a tired-looking man in his 50s answered. "Patrick Yates," the doctor said, surprised. "What brings you out in this weather?" "I need your help, Doc, or rather your wife's help. There is a newborn baby out at the old Henderson line shack. She was born during the storm yesterday. Her mother died in childbirth. She needs milk, and she needs it now, or she is not going to make it." The doctor's face went grave. "Mary," he called over his shoulder. "Mary, I need you out here." The doctor's wife appeared a moment later, a plump woman with kind eyes and a baby on her hip. Patrick explained the situation quickly, and Mary did not hesitate. "I will come," she said. "I have more milk than little Thomas here needs anyway. Let me get some things together." Within 20 minutes, They were on their way back to the line shack, Mary riding behind the doctor on his sturdy mare. Patrick led the way, pushing his tired gelding as fast as he dared through the snow. When they finally reached the shack, he nearly broke the door down in his haste to get inside. Rachel was where he had left her, the baby still clutched to her chest, but both of them looked worse than when he had left. Rachel's face was gray with exhaustion, and the baby's cries had weakened to thin mewls that barely qualified as sound. Mary took charge immediately. She settled onto the bunk, opened her shirtwaist, and gently took the baby from Rachel's arms. "There now, little one," she murmured. "Let us get you fed." The baby latched on immediately, sucking with a desperate hunger that made Patrick's chest tighten. Mary looked up at him and smiled. "She is a fighter, this one. She is going to be all right." Patrick felt something in him unclench, a tension he had been carrying since the moment he heard that first scream yesterday. He looked at Rachel and saw tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of relief. The doctor examined both Rachel and the baby, pronouncing them cold and exhausted but otherwise healthy. "The baby needs to be fed regularly, every 2 to 3 hours," he said. "Mary can help with that for the next few days, until we can find a wet nurse or figure out another solution. But she cannot stay out here in this shack. You all need to come back to town." "What about my sister?" Rachel asked. "She is still out there in the wagon." "We will organize a party to go get her," the doctor said gently. "We will bring her back and give her a proper burial. But right now, you need to think about yourself and the baby." They made the journey back to Nevada slowly, the doctor and Mary riding ahead, Patrick and Rachel following behind with the baby wrapped warm and secure between them. Rachel was silent for most of the ride, staring straight ahead, her face carved from stone. Patrick did not push her to talk. He figured she had said enough for one day. In town, the doctor and Mary insisted that Rachel and the baby stay with them, at least for the time being. Rachel agreed with a numbness that worried Patrick more than tears would have. He helped her inside, made sure she was settled, and then went to talk to the undertaker about retrieving Margaret's body. It took 2 days for the roads to clear enough to make the journey back to the broken wagon. Patrick rode with the undertaker and 3 other men, all of them grim-faced and silent. They found Margaret where Patrick had left her, frozen solid, preserved by the cold. They wrapped her in a clean canvas and brought her back to town, where she was laid out in the undertaker's parlor. Rachel stood over her sister's body for a long time, not speaking, just looking. Patrick stood beside her, feeling useless and awkward. Finally, Rachel reached out and touched Margaret's cold hand. "I am going to take care of her, Maggie," she whispered. "I promised you, and I meant it. I am going to raise your daughter to know how much you loved her." The funeral was held 2 days later, a small affair attended by the doctor and his wife, the undertaker, a few curious townspeople, and Patrick. They buried Margaret in the town cemetery, under a simple wooden cross that bore her name and the dates of her birth and death. Rachel stood at the graveside with the baby in her arms, and when the preacher asked if she wanted to say anything, she shook her head mutely. Patrick walked her back to the doctor's house afterward, carrying the few belongings that had been salvaged from the wagon. At the door, Rachel turned to him, and for the first time since her sister's death, she seemed to really see him. "I never properly thanked you," she said quietly. "You saved us, both of us. If you had not been out there in that storm, if you had not heard Maggie screaming, we would have died, all 3 of us." "I am glad I was there," Patrick said. "I just wish I could have saved your sister too." "You tried," Rachel said. "That is more than most men would have done. You could have ridden past. You could have told yourself it was not your problem, but you stopped, you helped. You stayed with us even when things got bad. That says something about who you are." Patrick felt his face heat, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same. No, Rachel said firmly, they would not have, but you did, and I will not forget it. She hesitated, then asked, will you come visit us, the baby and me? I would like her to know the man who brought her into this world. I will come, Patrick promised, and he meant it. He visited the next day and the day after that, and soon it became a routine. Every evening after his work at the Harrington Ranch was done, Patrick would ride into town and stop by the doctor's house. He would sit with Rachel and the baby, helping in whatever small ways he could. He learned how to hold an infant, how to change a diaper, how to soothe a crying child with gentle rocking and soft singing. It surprised him how natural it felt, how right. The baby thrived under Mary's care and Rachel's constant attention. She grew plumper and more alert with each passing day, her eyes brightening, her cries becoming stronger. Rachel decided to name her Sarah, after their grandmother, and the name seemed to fit the tiny, fierce little girl who had fought so hard to live. As the weeks passed, Patrick found himself thinking more and more about Rachel and Sarah when he was out on the range. He told himself it was just concern, just making sure they were all right, but he knew it was more than that. Rachel had gotten under his skin in a way no woman ever had before. There was a strength to her, a resilience that he admired. She had lost her sister, been thrust into motherhood with no preparation, and yet she faced each day with determination and grace. Rachel seemed to feel something too. Patrick caught her watching him sometimes, a look in her eyes that made his heart beat faster. When he held Sarah, Rachel would smile in a way that lit up her whole face, and Patrick found himself doing foolish things just to see that smile again. But there were complications. For one thing, there was the matter of Margaret's husband, Thomas, out in California. Technically, Sarah was his daughter. He had a right to know about his wife's death, about his child's existence. Rachel wrote to him, sending the letter to the last address Margaret had given her, but they heard nothing back. Weeks turned into a month and still no response. Maybe the letter never reached him, Rachel said one evening as she rocked Sarah to sleep. Patrick sat across from her in the doctor's parlor, watching the firelight play across her face. Or maybe he moved on and the address is no good anymore. Maybe, Patrick agreed. Or maybe he is trying to figure out what to do. What is there to figure out? Rachel asked, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Sarah is his daughter. He should want to come for her. Not every man is cut out to be a father, Patrick said carefully. Especially to a baby he has never met, whose mother died bringing her into the world. That is a lot to process. Rachel looked down at Sarah's sleeping face. She deserves better than a father who has to process whether he wants her. She has you, Patrick said, and you are doing a fine job. I am trying, Rachel said, but I do not know if it is enough. Mary has been so kind nursing Sarah, but she is talking about weaning her own baby soon. She cannot keep nursing too. I need to find a wet nurse, or figure out how to make formula that Sarah can digest, and I need to find a place to live because I cannot stay with the doctor and Mary forever. They have been generous, but I am imposing on their hospitality. And I need to find work, because Margaret and I spent the last of our money on supplies for the journey west. I have nothing left. No money, no family except Sarah, no home. The desperation in her voice cut Patrick to the bone. What about your family back east? Could you go to them? Rachel shook her head. We do not have anyone. It was just Maggie and me after our parents died. That is why she was so excited to start a family of her own. She wanted to belong to something again, to have people around her who loved her. Patrick made a decision then, one that probably should have taken more thought but felt absolutely right in the moment. Marry me, he said. Rachel's head snapped up, her eyes wide. What? Marry me, Patrick repeated, his heart pounding. I know it is sudden. And I know we have not known each other long, but think about it. If you are my wife, you will have a home, and Sarah will have a father to protect her and provide for her. I make decent money working cattle, and I have some savings put by. It is not much, but it is enough to keep the three of us fed and clothed. Mary can teach you how to make formula before she stops nursing Sarah. We can make this work. Patrick, Rachel said slowly, that is very generous of you, but you do not have to do this out of charity. Sarah and I will manage somehow. It is not charity, Patrick said. Rachel, I have been coming here every day for a month now, and it is not just because I want to check on the baby. It is because I want to see you. I want to hear about your day and tell you about mine. I want to sit across from you in the evenings and watch the firelight in your hair. I want to be part of your life, yours and Sarah's. Maybe I am not saying this right. Maybe I am doing this all backwards. But I care about you, Rachel. I care about both of you. And if you will have me, I would be honored to be your husband and Sarah's father. Rachel stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then slowly she smiled. You really mean that, do not you? Every word, Patrick said. I care about you too, Rachel said softly. More than I probably should, given how recently Maggie died. I feel guilty sometimes, feeling happy when I am with you, when my sister is barely cold in the ground. Your sister wanted you to be happy, Patrick said. She wanted you to take care of Sarah and to have a life. I do not think she would begrudge you finding someone to share that life with. You are probably right, Rachel said. She looked down at Sarah again, then back up at Patrick. If we do this, if we get married, it has to be a real marriage, not just some arrangement for convenience. I could not bear that, living with someone who was just tolerating me out of obligation. It will be real, Patrick promised. I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you know it is real. Then yes, Rachel said, her smile widening. Yes, I will marry you, Patrick Yates. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the church in Nevada. The doctor and Mary stood up for them, and the preacher performed the service in front of a small gathering of townsfolk who had taken an interest in the young woman who had lost her sister and the cowboy who had helped her. Rachel wore a simple blue dress that Mary had helped her sew, and Patrick wore his best shirt and trousers, his hair slicked back and his face freshly shaven. Sarah slept through the whole thing, wrapped warm in a blanket in Mary's arms. After the ceremony, Patrick took his new wife and daughter to the small house he had rented on the edge of town. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it was clean and sturdy, and it was theirs. He carried Rachel over the threshold while she laughed, then set her down gently and went back for Sarah. That night, they lay together in the narrow bed, Sarah sleeping in a cradle Patrick had built himself just 2 feet away. Rachel fit against him perfectly, her head on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. Patrick felt a contentment he had never known before, a sense of rightness that went bone deep. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Rachel said. "Surprisingly, wonderfully happy." "Is that terrible of me? Should I not be in mourning still? Your sister is gone," Patrick said. "Nothing you do or do not do is going to change that. But you are alive, and Sarah is alive, and you both deserve to live your lives to the fullest. I think that is what Margaret would want." "You are a good man, Patrick Yates," Rachel murmured. "I am very lucky to have found you." "I am the lucky one," Patrick said, and kissed the top of her head. The months that followed were not without their challenges. Learning to live together, to navigate the rhythms of marriage and parenthood, took time and patience. There were sleepless nights when Sarah cried and would not be comforted, and mornings when Patrick had to leave before dawn to ride out to the Harrington ranch, exhausted and wishing he could stay home. There were moments of frustration when Rachel struggled to get Sarah to take the formula Mary had taught her to make, when the baby would spit it up and scream, and nothing seemed to help. But there were good moments too, wonderful moments that made all the struggles worthwhile. The first time Sarah smiled at Patrick, a gummy, drooling grin that made his heart feel too big for his chest. The evening Rachel made a passable beef stew, and they celebrated like she had cooked a feast. The nights when they would lie together after Sarah fell asleep, talking in whispers about their days, their dreams, their hopes for the future. Patrick found himself falling more deeply in love with Rachel every day. She was smart and resourceful, learning quickly how to manage their small household, how to stretch their money to cover necessities, how to keep Sarah happy and healthy. She sang while she worked, teaching Sarah little songs that she remembered from her own childhood, and the sound of her voice filled their home with warmth. Rachel fell in love with Patrick too, though she did not say the words out loud for a long time. She showed it in the way she packed his lunch every morning, always including something special like a slice of pie or a handful of cookies. She showed it in the way she greeted him at the door every evening, Sarah on her hip, her face lighting up when she saw him. She showed it in the way she touched him, casual caresses that grew bolder as she became more comfortable, more sure of her place in his heart. It was 4 months after their wedding when Thomas finally showed up. Patrick was at work, out on the range mending fence, when a man rode into town asking after Margaret Anderson. The doctor, wary after hearing the story of how Margaret had died trying to reach her husband, sent word to Patrick at the ranch. Patrick rode back to town at a gallop, his heart in his throat, terrified of what he might find. He found Thomas sitting in his parlor, holding Sarah, with Rachel standing across the room looking like a cornered animal. Thomas was a tall man, thin and weather-beaten, with a hard look to him that Patrick did not like. He looked up when Patrick burst through the door, his eyes narrowing. "You must be the cowboy," Thomas said, "the one who delivered my daughter." "I am Patrick Yates," Patrick said, forcing himself to stay calm. "And you must be Thomas. We have been waiting to hear from you." "I got the letter 3 weeks ago," Thomas said. "Took me a while to get here. California to Missouri is not a short trip." He looked down at Sarah, his expression unreadable. "She looks like Margaret, same nose, same chin." "She is a beautiful baby," Patrick said carefully. "She is healthy and happy. Rachel has taken wonderful care of her." "Rachel," Thomas said, looking at Rachel for the first time. "My wife's sister. Margaret talked about you all the time. Said you were smart as a whip but stubborn as a mule." "Maggie knew me well," Rachel said, her voice tight. "I suppose I should thank you for looking after Sarah," Thomas said. "And I suppose I should thank you too, Yates, for helping with the birth." Margaret must have been terrified being caught in that storm. "She was very brave," Patrick said. "She fought hard to bring Sarah into the world. Her last words were about the baby, about making sure she was taken care of." Something flickered in Thomas's eyes, grief or guilt or some combination of the two. "I should have been there," he said quietly. "I should have sent for her sooner, or better yet, I should have stayed with her until after the baby was born. But I thought I was doing the right thing, getting established first, making sure I had work and a home for us." He stood up, still holding Sarah. "Well, I am here now. I came to take my daughter home with me to California." The words hit Patrick like a physical blow. He looked at Rachel and saw the blood drain from her face. "You cannot," she said. "You cannot just take her. She does not even know you." "She is my daughter," Thomas said. "I have a right to her." "You have a right to a lot of things," Patrick said, his voice hard. "But that does not mean you should exercise those rights. Sarah is 4 months old. She has never known anyone but Rachel and me. Taking her away from the only family she has ever had, dragging her across half the country to a place where you will be a stranger to her. That is not what is best for her." "And you think you know what is best for my daughter?" Thomas asked, his eyes flashing. "I think I know that she is happy and healthy and loved where she is," Patrick said. "I think I know that Rachel has been more of a mother to her than anyone else could be. I think I know that ripping her away from all of that is cruel." "She is my blood," Thomas said. "She is all I have left of Margaret." "She is not a keepsake," Rachel said, finding her voice. "She is a person, a little person who needs stability and love and care. Can you give her that, Thomas? Can you take care of an infant on your own while you work? Do you even know how to mix formula or change a diaper or soothe a colicky baby at 2 in the morning?" Thomas looked down at Sarah, who had started to fuss in his unfamiliar arms. "I can learn." "So could any man," Patrick said. "But the question is, do you want to? Do you really want to be a father to this baby, or do you just feel obligated because she is yours?" The question hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Thomas looked at Sarah, then at Rachel, then at Patrick. "I do not know," he finally admitted. "I thought I did. I thought I would come here and take her and feel connected to Margaret again. But looking at her, holding her, I just feel lost. I do not know this baby. I barely knew I was going to be a father before Margaret died, and the truth is, I am not ready for this. I am not set up for this. I am living in a boarding house, working 12-hour days in a lumber mill, and I do not know the first thing about raising a child." "Then do not take her," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "Please, Thomas. I know you have the legal right, but I am begging you, let her stay with us. Let us raise her. You can visit whenever you want, you can be part of her life, but please do not take her away." Thomas was quiet for a long time, looking down at Sarah. Then he held her out to Rachel. "Here, take her before she starts crying. She clearly wants you more than me." Rachel took Sarah, holding her close, tears streaming down her face. Sarah immediately quieted, burrowing into Rachel's shoulder with a content little sigh. Thomas watched them, his expression sad. "Margaret would have been a good mother," he said. "She wanted this so much, wanted a family. I was not a very good husband to her. I should have been there. I should have made different choices. But I cannot change the past. All I can do is try to make the right choice now." He looked at Patrick. "You seem like a decent man, and Rachel clearly loves this baby. If I leave Sarah with you, will you promise to take care of her? Will you promise to raise her right, to tell her about her real mother?" "I promise," Patrick said. "We both do. Sarah will know about Margaret, about how brave she was and how much she loved her. She will grow up knowing where she came from." "Then I am leaving her with you," Thomas said. "I will sign whatever papers need signing to make it legal, but I want you to know I am not abandoning her. I am giving her the best chance she has at a good life. There is a difference." "There is," Rachel agreed softly. "And I think Maggie would understand. I think she would approve." Thomas stayed in town for 3 more days, working with a lawyer to draw up papers that gave Patrick and Rachel legal guardianship of Sarah. He held the baby a few more times, awkwardly, always looking relieved when he could hand her back. On the morning he left, he stopped by the house one last time. "I am going to send money when I can," he said. "For Sarah's upbringing. It is not much, but it is something." "That is generous of you," Patrick said. "We will put it aside for her future, for when she is grown and needs it." Thomas nodded. He looked at Sarah one more time, sleeping peacefully in her cradle. "Take care of her," he said. "Both of you." "We will," Rachel promised. After Thomas left, Patrick found Rachel sitting in the rocking chair with Sarah in her arms, crying quietly. He knelt beside her, taking her hand. "What is wrong? I thought you would be happy. Sarah is staying with us." "I am happy," Rachel said. "I am so relieved I can barely breathe. But I also feel sad for Thomas and for Maggie. She loved him so much, and he is so lost without her. And Sarah will never know her real mother, never feel Margaret's arms around her or hear her voice. That breaks my heart. We will make sure she knows, Patrick said. We will tell her stories about Margaret, about how brave and kind and loving she was. We will take her to visit Margaret's grave. We will make sure she grows up knowing she was wanted and loved from the moment she was born. Thank you, Rachel whispered. Thank you for being the kind of man who would take on another man's child, who would fight to keep her safe. Thank you for being you. Thank you for choosing me, Patrick said, for trusting me with Sarah and with your heart. I know this has all happened fast, and I know it has been hard, but I want you to know that I love you, Rachel. I love you and I love Sarah, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you both know it. I love you too, Rachel said, the words coming easily now. I have loved you for weeks, maybe since that first night in the line shack when you promised me everything would be all right. You have kept every promise you have made to me, Patrick Yates. You are a good man and a good father and the best husband I could have asked for. Patrick leaned in and kissed her, soft and sweet, with Sarah sleeping between them. It was a perfect moment, the three of them together, a family bound not by blood but by choice and love and determination. The years that followed were good ones. Patrick continued working for the Harrington Ranch, eventually working his way up to foreman, a position that came with better pay and more respect. He saved money carefully, and when Sarah turned 3, he bought a small piece of land just outside Nevada. It was not much, just 20 acres with a creek running through it, but it was theirs. He built a house on it with his own hands, a real house with 3 bedrooms and a proper kitchen, and a porch where Rachel could sit and watch Sarah play in the yard. Sarah grew into a bright, energetic little girl with her mother's dark hair and her father Thomas's gray eyes. She called Patrick Papa and Rachel Mama, and if she ever wondered why she looked different from the other children in town who lived with their blood parents, she never said. Patrick and Rachel told her about Margaret when she was old enough to understand, showing her the grave in the cemetery, telling her stories about the brave woman who had died bringing her into the world. Sarah listened solemnly, then asked if they could pick flowers to leave on Aunt Margaret's grave. After that, it became a tradition. Once a month they would visit the cemetery together, and Sarah would place flowers on Margaret's grave and tell her about what was happening in her life. When Sarah was 5, Rachel got pregnant. It was unexpected, a blessing they had not been planning on but welcomed with open arms. Patrick was over the moon, doting on Rachel, worrying about her constantly. Rachel laughed at him but secretly loved the attention. She had an easy pregnancy, nothing like what poor Margaret must have gone through, and when the time came, she delivered a healthy baby boy with the doctor and Patrick both in attendance. They named him Peter, after Patrick's father, and Sarah was delighted to have a baby brother. 2 years after Peter was born, they had another child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose, after Rachel's sister. Maggie, as they called her, had her mother's red hair and her father's green eyes, and she was as stubborn as they came. Sarah adored her little siblings, playing with them endlessly, helping Rachel with their care, growing into a responsible and loving young girl. Life on the small ranch was hard work but satisfying. Patrick raised cattle and horses, building up a modest but successful operation. Rachel kept a large garden and chickens, selling eggs and vegetables in town to bring in extra money. The children helped with chores as they got older, learning the value of hard work and family. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. On Sarah's 10th birthday, Rachel and Patrick sat her down for a serious talk. "You are old enough now to understand something important," Patrick said. "You know that your mother Margaret died when you were born, and that we have been raising you since then. But there is more to the story that we want you to know." Sarah listened intently as they told her about Thomas, about how he had come to take her to California, but had decided to leave her with them instead. They told her about the papers he had signed, about the money he had sent over the years that they had saved for her. They told her that if she ever wanted to find him, to know him, they would help her do that. Sarah thought about it for a long time, her young face serious. "Do I have to decide right now?" she asked. "No," Rachel said. "You do not have to decide anything right now. We just wanted you to know the truth, to know all of your story." "I think I would like to write him a letter," Sarah said slowly, "to tell him that I am all right, that I am happy. And maybe to thank him for letting me stay with you. But I do not need another papa. I have you, Papa, and you are the best father I could want. And Mama, you are the only mother I have ever known. Margaret gave birth to me, and I will always be grateful to her for that, but you raised me. You are my parents." Patrick had to turn away to hide the tears in his eyes. Rachel pulled Sarah into a fierce hug, holding her tight. "You are our daughter," she whispered, "always and forever, no matter what." Sarah did write to Thomas, a simple letter telling him about her life, her family, her school. To their surprise, he wrote back, a short note saying he was glad she was happy and that he thought about her often. They exchanged letters once or twice a year after that, a cordial relationship that satisfied Sarah's curiosity without disrupting the family she had built with Patrick and Rachel. The years rolled on, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. There were droughts that tested their resources, hard winters that pushed them to their limits, illnesses and injuries that reminded them how fragile life could be. But there were also celebrations, birthdays and holidays and harvest festivals. There were quiet evenings on the porch, Patrick and Rachel sitting close together while the children played in the yard. There were Sunday dinners with friends and neighbors, the house full of laughter and good food. When Sarah turned 18, she announced that she wanted to become a teacher. Patrick and Rachel were proud but worried about the cost. Teaching required schooling, and schooling cost money. But Sarah was determined, and they could never deny her anything. They dipped into the savings that Thomas had sent over the years, added some of their own, and sent Sarah to a teaching college in Kansas City. She came home 2 years later with a certificate and a job offer at the school in Nevada. Peter grew up to be a rancher like his father, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Patrick got older. He was a quiet boy, thoughtful and hardworking, and Patrick could not have been prouder. Maggie, their youngest, was the wild one, always getting into scrapes, always pushing boundaries. She had her mother's spirit and her father's stubborn determination, and everyone who knew her predicted she would do something remarkable with her life. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Patrick took Rachel back to the old Henderson Line shack, where they had spent that first terrible, wonderful night together. The shack was still standing, though barely, weathered by 2 decades of storms and snow. They stood together looking at it, their hands intertwined. "I was so scared that night," Rachel said softly. "I thought I was going to lose everything. My sister was dying, the baby was dying, I was alone in the middle of nowhere with a stranger. And then you walked through that door, and somehow I knew it was going to be all right." "I was scared too," Patrick admitted. "I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I had to try, had to do something. And then I saw you, so brave and strong even in the worst moment of your life, and I thought, if she can keep fighting, so can I." "We have built a good life together, have we not?" Rachel asked. "The best life," Patrick agreed. 20 years, 3 children, and I would not change a single thing. Well, maybe I would have skipped that drought in '87 and the time Peter broke his arm falling out of the barn loft, and when Maggie got kicked by that ornery mule," Rachel laughed. All right, so maybe we would change a few things. But the important parts, the love and the family and the home we have built, those are perfect. You are perfect, Patrick said, turning to face her. At 42, Rachel was even more beautiful to him than she had been at 22. Her face showed the lines of 2 decades of laughter and worry, and her red hair had a few threads of silver in it now, but her eyes were as bright and full of life as ever. I love you more today than I did the day I married you, and I will love you even more tomorrow. That is a good thing, Rachel said, smiling up at him, because you are stuck with me for the next 20 years at least. Only 20, Patrick teased. I was hoping for at least 40 more. Well, if you insist, Rachel said and kissed him. They walked back to their horses hand in hand, and as they rode home together in the fading light, Patrick felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had been in the right place at the right time 2 decades ago, had heard a woman scream in a snowstorm, and made the choice to stop and help. That choice had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined, had given him a wife he adored, children he loved more than life itself, and a purpose that went beyond just surviving day to day. Sarah taught in Nevada for 3 years before falling in love with a young lawyer named David Thompson, who had just opened a practice in town. They were married in 1898, and Patrick walked Sarah down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. Rachel cried too, happy tears for the beautiful young woman Sarah had become. Sarah and David settled in Nevada, building a house just down the road from Patrick and Rachel's ranch. They had 4 children of their own, and Sarah proved to be every bit as good a mother as Rachel had been. Peter married a rancher's daughter named Elizabeth, a sensible girl who was not afraid of hard work. They took over the running of the ranch as Patrick and Rachel grew older, expanding the operation, adding more cattle and horses. Peter and Elizabeth had 3 sons, all of them with Peter's quiet nature and strong work ethic. The ranch became a true family operation with 3 generations working side by side. Maggie, true to everyone's predictions, did something remarkable. She became a journalist, writing for newspapers in Kansas City and St. Louis, traveling all over the country chasing stories. She never married, declaring that she was too busy living life to settle down, but she came home often, filling the house with tales of her adventures and making everyone laugh with her stories. Patrick and Rachel grew old together, their love deepening with every passing year. They celebrated 30 years of marriage, then 40. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents. They watched their children and grandchildren thrive, building lives of their own, and they knew they had done something right. On a warm summer evening in 1919, Patrick and Rachel sat together on the porch of the house he had built for her 40 years earlier. They were both in their 80s now, their bodies worn by decades of hard work, but their minds were still sharp, and their love was still strong. Sarah came by with her youngest daughter, bringing fresh bread and berry jam. Peter stopped in after finishing the evening chores, sitting on the porch steps to chat with his father. Maggie was home for a visit, regaling them with stories of her latest assignment covering the aftermath of the war in Europe. After everyone had left and the sun had set, Patrick and Rachel sat in comfortable silence, holding hands. "Do you ever think about that night?" Rachel asked. "The night we met? I think about it often," Patrick said. "I think about how different my life would have been if I had ridden past that wagon, if I had told myself it was not my problem. I would have missed out on everything, on you and Sarah and all of this. It does not bear thinking about." "I think Margaret sent you to us," Rachel said softly. "I think she was watching over us, even as she was dying, and she made sure we were not alone. She sent us the one man who would stop and help, who would care enough to stay, who would love us enough to make us his family." "Maybe she did," Patrick said. "Or maybe it was just luck and timing. But either way, I am grateful. Every single day I am grateful for that storm and that scream and the choice I made to stop. It was the best decision I ever made." "It was the best thing that ever happened to me too," Rachel said. "You saved us, Patrick. You saved Sarah's life and mine, and then you gave us a life worth living. You gave us love and family and a home. You gave us everything." "We gave each other everything," Patrick said, squeezing her hand. "That is what love is, Rachel. Giving and receiving, building something together that is bigger than either of you could create alone. We did that. We built this life together, and I could not be prouder of what we made." They sat together as the stars came out. Two old people who had loved each other for 4 decades, who had weathered every storm and celebrated every joy side by side. And when they finally went inside for the night, climbing the stairs slowly, their steps careful on knees that creaked and complained, they did it together, as they had done everything for 40 years. Patrick Yates lived to be 86 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep with Rachel beside him, in the house he had built with his own hands, surrounded by the family he loved. Rachel lived 2 more years, cared for by her children and grandchildren, and when she finally passed, it was with a smile on her face and Sarah holding her hand. They buried her next to Patrick in the Nevada cemetery, just a few plots over from Margaret's grave. On her headstone, Sarah had them engrave the words "beloved wife, mother, and sister." She kept her promise. Sarah lived to be 92, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all of them carrying forward the legacy of love and family that Patrick and Rachel had started on a snowy night in 1879. She told the story often, of the cowboy who had stopped to help, who had delivered her in a blizzard, and then chosen to stay, to raise her as his own, to build a family with her aunt out of tragedy and loss and determination. She told the story of 2 people who had fallen in love in the most unlikely circumstances and had built a life together that lasted a lifetime. And every time she told the story, she ended it the same way, with the words her mama had taught her, the words that summed up everything Patrick and Rachel had believed in. "Love is not just something you feel," she would say. "It is something you do. It is showing up when things are hard. It is making a choice every single day to care for someone else as much as you care for yourself." My papa showed up on the worst night of my mama's life, and he kept showing up every day after that for 40 years. That is what love looks like. That is what family means. The story of Patrick Yates and Rachel Anderson became part of local legend in Nevada, Missouri. Generations later, people still talked about the cowboy who had delivered a baby in a blizzard and then married the baby's aunt, who had raised that child as his own and built a life of love and purpose out of tragedy. The ranch they had started was still there, still in the family, still thriving. The house Patrick built still stood, though it had been expanded and modernized over the years. And in the cemetery, their graves stood side by side, a testament to a love that had started in the snow and had lasted until death parted them. It was a story about choosing to stop when you could have kept riding, about choosing to help when you could have looked away, about choosing love when fear and uncertainty would have been easier. It was a story about family, not the one you are born into but the one you build with your choices and your heart. It was a story about keeping promises, honoring the dead by living well, and finding beauty and purpose even in the darkest moments. But most of all, it was a love story. A love story that started with a scream in a snowstorm and ended 80 years later with a family that stretched across generations, all of them carrying forward the legacy of the cowboy who stopped to help and the woman who trusted him to keep his promise. It was a love story that proved that the best families are not always the ones connected by blood, but the ones connected by choice and courage and an unwavering commitment to show up for each other, no matter what. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the hardships they had faced or the tragedies they had endured, but the love they had built and the family they had created and the life they had lived together. It was a good life, a full life, a life worth celebrating. And it all started on a cold March night in 1879, when a cowboy heard a woman screaming in the snow and made the choice to stop and help. That choice changed everything. That choice created a love story for the ages,